Today I want to tell you a wild story about how an iconic East German motorbike became a political symbol for Germany's far right and the dispute that followed.
That's when I was really shocked that I saw shirts that said AfD and Simson.
A few weeks ago, my colleague and Washington bureau chief Ines Pohl forwarded me an email. The subject line read, "Crazy story about the AfD and my Jewish family." I kept reading. My family is caught up in a rather surreal story in Germany that you might find interesting. It's about how the AfD has seized on a motorcycle brand called Simson as a kind of creepy symbol of East German nationalistic pride. My first reaction was to kick myself because this actually wasn't news to me. 2 years ago, I was reporting on concerns in the Jewish community about the rising popularity of the far-right Alternative for Germany party in Eastern Germany. And off camera, a rabbi told me the AfD was using a local motorbike brand to stir nostalgia and link the affection for those bikes to their own political brand. That brand was Simson. In case you've never heard of them, Simson mopeds were hugely popular in communist East Germany. They gave people, especially young people, a sense of freedom they otherwise didn't have. After reunification, they became cult objects. More recently, the AfD party has latched onto this nostalgia. Björn Höcke, a leading figure in the East, even hosts an annual Simson tour. Höcke has previously described the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin as a monument of shame and called for a turnaround in Germany's culture of remembrance, basically saying Germans need to get over their wartime guilt. And the rabbi told me it was especially painful because Simson was founded by Jews. I assumed the story had been widely reported and didn't think much more about it until that email. It continued, Simson was originally a German Jewish company with an amazing history. My great-grandparents owned it before it was stolen by the Nazis and they had to flee. Only later was it taken over by the Soviets. Then, after German reunification, a group led by my mum's cousin Dennis Baum tried to get the factory back. So here was an incredible story, American Jews whose ancestors were persecuted by the Nazis, discovering that their family brand is now being used by the German far right. Ines and I agreed she had to track down Dennis Baum. She did, and they had a fascinating conversation about his ancestors, how the family discovered the AfD campaigns, how they feel about it, and how they're responding.
I would like to start our interview with this little video clip. You might have seen it.
Oh, yeah.
This goes on forever, but
and then he gets up and says, "My liebe Freunde," and oh, he's a horror show.
When you see that, how does this make you feel?
Okay, there's a backstory. We got to start a little earlier than that. Many years ago, I went to Berlin. We went to the Jewish Museum, and we had a kind of debate on stage. And there was an audience, quite a good audience, and the details of the debate itself are not so important, but what happened at the end of the debate was the reason I'm telling you the story. Somebody stood up in the audience and they said, "Mr. Baum," I'm talking about 8 or 10 years ago, I don't remember exactly when it happened. "Mr. Baum, do you know that there are Simson Schwalbe clubs all over East Germany?" I said, "No, what do they do?" "Well, we gather together, we take care of our bikes, and we go on excursions throughout the countryside." And I thought that was the most wonderful thing that I've heard. A really lovely idea. 4 months ago or so, I received from some friends in Germany videos of what the AfD was doing with our name. And that's when I was really shocked that I saw shirts that said AfD and Simson, or shirts that said Höcke and Simson. and posters that said the same thing, and flags that said the same thing. And I said, this is too much. And our friends in Germany were really upset. And when I talked to the other members of the family, they were equally upset. And that's when we decided we're going to go ahead and make a full-fledged effort to try to stop it. So that's my answer, long answer to your question.
Dennis, what would you say are your reactions more personal, more political, or more historical?
Well, it's certainly historical, but it's personal historics. We take great pride in what the family did over the years, and I'll show you some things later on. Certainly for the family's name, a Jewish family's name, to be used by the AfD, a distinctly anti-Semitic party, anti-social, anti-everything, it seems, it was infuriating for us all. We got together, all 5 groups of Simpson heirs, 5 different families around, and we decided we were going to make a major effort to stop this, and we didn't care what it cost.
What does the name Simpson mean to you today?
Interesting question too, because I certainly knew the name Simpson all through the years, but there wasn't terribly much talk in the family from the grandparents or my parents' generation about Simpson until the wall came down. And when the wall came down, we actually had a major responsibility to go into East Germany and try to recover those assets using the Treuhandanstalt to help us. Prior to the wall coming down, my mother had corresponded with a former engineer of the Simpson Company who kept us up to date. And you'll see his books when we go in there. His name is Ewald Dehn, a lovely man. And he kept writing to my mother, and she wrote to him. And he kept us up to date on what was happening in Zuhl. But the focus on Zuhl really started when the wall came down, and we had to focus. And eventually we went to Germany, very early 90s, and we went there with a team of lawyers. We hired a local businessman to represent us there. He hired some people, put up an office in the Simpson Villa. I got to stay in the villa in the early 90s when we first went over. It was still a hotel, so it still existed, and it was still staffed, and you could eat there. So I got to sleep in my great-grandmother's room, Jeanette, and I swear that I got messages from her. I got a message saying that I should go after whatever I could possibly recover for the family. And I never thought that I'd be protecting the family's name like this, but certainly the message that she gave me was that I got to do that.
I would like to stay a little bit in your childhood and your growing up. What role did your family history, like you being Jewish, you being exiled, your family members being kicked out of your home, which role did this play when you grew up?
You know, it's interesting because there's a philosophy now that the children of the Holocaust victims should also receive psychological care because there is some leftover trauma. I'm not so sure that's right, but maybe in some places it is right. From our point of view, family point of view, there wasn't much talk at all about the old days in Germany. I certainly knew about my father's leaving Germany and his friends leaving Germany. In fact, he emigrated with his best friend. The two of them came over in 1936. My mother's family left about the same time. They didn't know each other, and they met in this country and got married in this country. And to this day, I regret that I never asked the right questions. My parents are gone. There's a lot of questions that I would wish that I had posed back then.
What would be the first question come to mind if you would have the chance?
Well, I'd want to know more about what happened before they left. I have some records of them on the ship coming over. How was it that they settled on day one when they got off the ship? I don't know there's probably 100 questions or more that I should have asked, but I never asked. And maybe I was too young, and certainly the momentum of what's happening right now and what's happening since the wall came down has changed a lot too. It's brought everything into focus.
When did you maybe you can recall it, when you learned about the Simpson for the first time, or was this always there in your life?
It was there. It was always there, but it was really, really distant. And I remember when we went to the old East German, or we went to Zuhl, something struck me very, very in a strange way. And we were in a car, we were driving, we had the lawyer in back, and my wife was in front, and I was driving, and we came up behind a bus, and on the back of the bus was an advertisement for Simpson. Mm-hmm. And it just clicked. I can't believe our family name is on a bus. And then you drive into Zuhl, and Simpson was everywhere. And I never realized the extent of what they had done in Zuhl.
I would really be interested in if you have an understanding why Simpson is so attractive for the AfD.
This is perhaps a wonderful political tool to bring this nostalgia back to life. The Simpson bike happens to be a little bit special because it was the only moped that was allowed to go 60 kilometers per hour, and it had a wonderful history in the old DDR, because you could get a Simpson moped pretty quickly. If you wanted a car, you had to wait 5 years or longer. So it was the first real opportunity for an awful lot of people to have some so-called freedom, namely freedom to ride in the countryside, freedom to move around with ease in a country that was kind of locked in. Mm-hmm. So that's the nostalgia that they've been milking. And the young generation likes it. And I think there's still, unfortunately, a lot of friction between the Westies and the Easties or Osties. It gave them an ability to shut out the Western mentality and focus on something purely East, and something that had brought them a bit of freedom.
What would be a good way to remember Simpson?
Oh, you've got to remember the way that the factories were run, the way that the whole Simpson clan lived. They were good people, they were fun people, they had a wonderful relationship with their workers. They were extremely smart in the way that they organize their businesses. And I was lucky enough in my youth to actually have met Arthur and Julius, and I'm talking about when I was 10 or 12. And these were really fun-loving people. Very, in a way, a little bit odd because neither one of them married. None of the Simpson boys married. And when they fled to the U.S., they fled with their secretaries. And they lived with their secretaries until they died. And they took care of them afterwards, too. So this lady whom I met with Uncle Arthur, I was told, you call her Tante Lena. She was not Tante, but she was my Tante Lena. And they were very, very delightful people. And there were a couple of nephews, in particular, Ewald Mayer, who you'll see more about in that other room. He also was thrown in jail at the time and had to sign the release of the factory to Hitler.
Maybe we move back to 1991. You were talking a little bit about it. Maybe you can tell me again, what did you try to achieve after the wall came down?
We had an awful lot of properties there. It was ranged from factories to villas to villages to the little garden plots that they have next to the railroads. We had quite a few of those. All of those were returned to us. It's business that was returned to us and personal Simpson items that were returned to us. So all of that had to be liquidated or developed. We did both. And that started in 1991, and certainly we had to have agreement from the Treuhandanstalt with each item. Just as a coincidence, that was back in 1991 that we started it. I just finished 3 months ago the last of the payment. It took all of 33 years to wind this up. And then I thought I was finished. And then something new came up. AfD.
And then what?
And that was a new mission. And that's a really big mission. And we're going to fight to the end to make sure our name is not associated with any of this crude, irreverent policies of the AfD, particularly the anti-Semitic positions that they've taken with great pride.
So how does this look like, Dennis? How do you work on that issue?
Well, I didn't know the answer to that either. So we discussed it, all 5 parts of the family, and decided to hire a communication consultant. And she was really, really good, really good. She advised us that while the Simpson name was extremely well known in the East, no problem whatsoever, that in the West, they didn't really know terribly much about the Simpsons. So the press release, to a certain degree, had to educate the West, the Western journalists as well. It worked.
And so what are you hoping for now? You know, what could be the next steps?
Well, I have only one objective: get our name out of the AfD Hokke sphere. I don't want it involved whatsoever. It has nothing to do with the Simpson Schwalbe. They keep getting that issue mixed up. They can have the Schwalbe, they can do what they want with the Schwalbe, they can make it a target of great nostalgia, and it's wonderful. And I love these clubs that they have. They are marvelous. But get our name out of the mix when it comes to AfD politics. And I should say the Simson name shouldn't be involved in politics whatsoever. But it's absolutely horrendous that of all places it gets hooked up to AfD thinking.
Your whole family is on your side here, right?
We've all agreed to share the expenses, whatever expenses come up, it's been good for the family and good for the next generation. Really good for the next generation. They're being exposed to something they had no idea about, and I'm very happy for that too.
The AfD denies that it is anti-Semitic and has pushed back at the Baum family's criticism, calling the reaction symbolic hysteria. But this whole story raises deeper questions about how political movements use nostalgia, about who gets to define the meaning of a cultural symbol, and about what it feels like when a family's own stolen history is suddenly repurposed as a kind of identity marker for the far right. Because in the end, Simson isn't just a motorbike. It's heritage, memory, pride, and for the Baum family, loss. And all of that is now being rewritten in today's political battles.